The injuries the Chicago Bears suffered late in the season are going to make free agency and the NFL draft a lot more complicated for Ryan Poles.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. On the show today, we're going to take a deep dive into three key positions dealing with injuries in the offseason for the Bears that happened late in this past regular season and playoffs that are now going to impact what the Bears are going to do in free agency and the NFL draft, because you're just not sure exactly when you're going to get these guys back, what shape and condition they're going to be when you do get them back, and then therefore how much you can rely on them once they're back. So then do you have to replace them or find temporary replacements or long-term replacements? It's a very tricky, complicated picture for Ryan Poles to work through, and that's what we're going to try and do on today's podcast. We'll start with the defensive line, where Dayo Odeyingbo and Shamar Turner both suffered serious injuries that will threaten to derail the beginnings of next season for them. Same thing is true on the offensive line with Ozzie Trapillo at left tackle, where he could miss maybe as much as all of next season. And then there's some questions at linebacker too, with a couple of injuries there that may not have been as severe, but still make the decisions at that position this offseason complicated. I do want to thank you for making the Locked On Bears podcast your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network. And the number one position of need that we want to see the Bears address this offseason is the defensive line, namely the pass rush, but being able to stop the run better with the front is a key factor as well. It's something that we're going to spend a lot of time talking about on this podcast in terms of top free agent edge rushers and defensive tackles, top draft edge rushers and defensive tackles. And it's easy to just sit here and say, throw more at the position, but it's a pretty complicated defensive line picture, both because of some salary cap mechanisms that we'll talk about, in the coming weeks on the podcast, but also just from an injury and a health standpoint. Like, obviously, this is a group that needs more talent and that the Bears need to just improve overall, but we don't even know exactly who's going to be ready for training camp, who's going to be ready for week one, and if not ready for week one, then ready when? Because if you look at who the Bears have on the defensive line right now, obviously coming back, Montez Sweat, Grady Jarrett, Javon Dexter, Austin Booker, all under contract. And then you've got Dayo Odeyingbo and Shamar Turner, both under contract, both recovering from serious injuries suffered around the same time on the defensive line. Everybody else is set to be a free agent. At least as of now, none of them have been re-signed. So it's those six, but two of them are coming off of very serious injuries. Shamar Turner tore his ACL, I believe it was at the end of October. And then Dayo Odeyingbo ruptured his Achilles at the beginning of November. They were right around the same time. And two separate injuries, I don't want to just completely lump them into one category here. I think generally we see recoveries from torn ACLs happen a little faster than Achilles and tend to be a little bit more commonplace and a little bit less serious. I'm not to say it's not serious, but just, given that if we try and do some quick timetable recovery math here, I'm not a doctor. Everybody's injuries are going to require a different amount of recovery, and you can't just generalize all of them. But I think we've seen ACL tears be closer to 9 months type of recovery time, sometimes faster, sometimes slower. But if we put that as an average there, 9 months from the end of October, essentially the start of November, would then put you, November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June would be 8 months. So in theory, if Shamar Turner has a fairly normal return recovery from a torn ACL, he should be back in time for training camp, potentially, but he will have missed all of the offseason, all of OTAs, all of minicamp, and be very late in the process of returning for year two after having missed half of his year one. So he's already behind in general as an NFL player, as a rookie, as a defensive lineman adjusting the NFL. Now you take away a whole offseason's worth of practice time and development, he's going to be behind again. And you add on top of that that we don't even sure what position he's going to play on this Bears defensive line. They spent all of training camp and OTAs and mini camp and stuff with him as an interior defensive tackle. And he played there for the first, he only played the first half of the season in general, but the first, 6 or 7 games of the season, he was an interior guy. And then randomly, I was going to say late in the season, but late in his playing time of the season, Dennis Allen decided to kick him outside to defensive end. I think in large part because they were having some injuries at defensive end and feeling like they needed to get more depth on the outside. But all of a sudden he kicks and becomes an edge rusher really just for the final, as I'm looking back over season, looks like the final 3 games that he played in, he was an edge rusher. And the first, he really only played 2 games to start the season because he was injured during training camp too. So he played a couple of games in the interior, then kicked outside, played a couple of games on the outside, and then out for the season with a torn ACL. So it's this combination of, we don't know what position they're going to play him at. We don't know how quickly he'll be healthy. And even when he is healthy, he's going to be so far behind. I don't know. Can you count on Shamar Turner? Certainly not going to be a starting caliber player next season, but a backup who rotates in perhaps, but then rotates in on the interior, the outside, both. How they approach that is one of these unanswered questions that will shape where they might use a draft pick. And if they see Shamar Turner as a defensive tackle, and you already have Javon Dexter, then maybe you're not going to use a high draft pick on a defensive tackle if you have a couple of young guys that you already like. But if you see Shamar Turner as an edge rusher, well, now you've got a 2nd-round pick and a Shamar Turner edge rusher, plus a 5th-round Austin Booker from a couple years ago. Dayo Odeyingbo is a younger ascending player. Maybe they feel like, well, we've got young edge rushers. Maybe you don't need to use a high draft pick on an edge rusher, but you do on the interior. He kind of can be that a significant investment at either spot, but we don't know where that investment's actually going to be. Then we come around to Dayo Odeyingbo, who tore his Achilles in early November. And that can be as much as a 12-month recovery in some cases. I mean, I think 9 to 12 months is kind of the range there. So again, we'd be looking at start of training camp would be about 9 months, and 12 months would be November, halfway through the regular season before he's even cleared to play. That's not even in terms of getting back up to game shape, game speed, and then trying to get better as a pass rusher who had 1 sack last season and was a massive disappointment on the field. All of a sudden, Odeyingbo and Turner are both going to play at some point next season, certainly, but you can't necessarily count on either one being totally 100% good to go, no questions asked by week 1. I mean, Turner more likely than Odeyingbo, but all of a sudden, that's 2 of your 6 key defensive linemen that you have under contract right now that you're just unsure exactly what you're going to get from them. And so if you've got whatever it is, a $20 million cap hit in Dayo Odeyingbo next season, and you're not sure how much you're going to get from him, well, then how much can you spend on a free agent edge rusher there? Can you afford to clear the space and go sign someone like a Trey Hendrickson of sorts when Odeyingbo is going to cost you $20.5 million against the salary cap this year if they keep him on the roster? And Shamar Turner, of course, has a 2nd-round pick. And you got Grady Jarrett, who's going to count you about $19 million against the salary cap this year if he comes back. That's a lot of money in guys that didn't perform very well last season. And Grady Jarrett dealt with his own injuries too, a lot of injuries in this mix. So not knowing their statuses makes it hard to know how much you should or can invest in that defensive line. If you knew Odeyingbo was out for the season, well, then it's a little easier to just say, all right, screw it. Let's go get a new edge rusher and kind of plan that, he's never going to play another snap for the Bears and you're going to cut him because he's cost too much and he's not going to play. So you might hold on to him for this year, but he's never, he's not a part of the long-term piece anymore if you know he's not going to play all season. But if you think, well, he might be able to go week 1 and they still have a bunch of faith in him to be a starting caliber edge rusher, which by all accounts, I think they still do, even though we didn't see a lot of proof of that. Well, then maybe they look at it and say, well, he'll be ready for week 1, so we don't need to go out and add a premium edge rusher type player, especially if they see Turner as an edge rusher as well. Maybe they say, okay, we are fine with that position and add on the interior. It's messy and it's complicated, and it makes it really hard for us to sit here today and predict what they're going to do at such a pivotal, important position for refurbishing this Bears defense and getting them back up to a more acceptable level of performance. Starts with that pass rush, and there's 2 really key question marks that I don't know when we're going to get an answer to. Maybe Ryan Poles at the Combine or whatever will have timeline updates and give us a sense at least how they view those situations. But even then, there's going to be we'll see what happens when we get there, because even timeline prognosis and projections for when they'll be back don't always come to fruition, and sometimes they get delayed, and sometimes it happens sooner. So it's going to be a mess to keep an eye on all off-season long. Also, some real question marks then at left tackle on the offensive line, where Ozzy Trapillo's timetable for return keeps fluctuating and seems to be getting worse and worse by every new report. So we'll check in on what the status is at left tackle and how that might shape what the Bears do at that position this offseason. Next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by Indeed. If you've ever hired someone who looks good on paper, but turns out not maybe the right fit, then you know just how important that is for your business. So when you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring? Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs. So spend more time interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Do it the right way with Indeed. I do want to thank you again for making the Locked On Bears podcast your first listen today. We really appreciate all of you who tune in, whether it's once a week or every single day. You are why we do this podcast through and through. And if you want to take your listening to the next level, you can join the Locked On Bears Everydayers Club and get access to an ad-free audio feed of Locked On Bears. It's compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all of your major podcasting apps. Plus, you'll also get access to an exclusive Locked On Bears listener group chat just for listeners of this show in the Locked On Everydayers Club Discord server. If you want to check it out, you can go to lockedonbears.supercast to find out more. And you can always find that link in the show notes descriptions for the podcast or video on YouTube, wherever it is that you tune in to Locked On Bears. Because we're going to be talking about this left tackle situation a lot this offseason, where you saw from Ozzy Trapillo over the second half of the season that he started, he looked like a pretty reliable starting caliber offensive tackle. Is he going to become some Pro Bowl game-changing difference maker? Maybe not. You know, he's not going to be Darnell Wright trajectory, but looked like a guy who, while he made mistakes and wasn't perfect, you felt like you could win games and get by and feel like left tackle wasn't some humongous glaring weakness. Like he was on the type of trajectory that you would hope for a rookie second-round pick. Not perfect, but showing you the kind of stuff you like. And you clean up a little bit more as his career gets going, he could be a really solid starting offensive tackle for you. There's not really a lot of question about what Trapillo was able to do when he was playing. But then against the Green Bay Packers, he ruptures his patellar tendon. And I'll be honest with you, not 100% sure where the patellar tendon is. I think it's in the leg down by the ankle, but not Achilles. Yeah, not super important, but it's a severe, significant injury and one that seems to take quite some time to recover. And by the ways it sounds about Ozzy Trapillo, it could take quite some time to recover. I believe it's Brad Biggs of the Chicago Tribune has said that this torn patellar injury could sideline him for the majority of the 2026 season. Because if you think about it, perhaps again, I'm not a doctor, not a medical expert on injury recovery, and we'll caveat that every player's injuries are different and their bodies recover differently. But like, if we put this as a potential, 9 to 12 month type of injury, even if it's 9 months to be the most, generous there, he suffered that injury on January 10th. Imagine he probably was a couple days before he gets surgery before you really start that timeline. But like still, beginning of January, 9 months would put you to beginning of September before he would be recovered from that. And by the sounds of it, potentially being the bulk of his season, if it's a 10-month injury, October, it's a 12-month injury, will get you all the way to, I guess, no, sorry, 9 months would put you to the beginning of October if I could do calendar math. So already, like at best, he's missing the first month and change of the season. Could miss the first half of the season, could miss 3/4 of the season. I mean, the closer you get to 12 months, the closer you get to a full season missed from Ozzy Trapillo. And that puts you in a tricky spot because you kind of feel like Trapillo should be probably the long-term, I don't know, like at least the immediate long-term answer on the offensive tackle. Like until he proves otherwise, the plan would be if Ozzy Trapillo was healthy today, he would be a starter for you next year and a starter until he gives a reason not to be the starter. Like that he was good enough to say, let's keep rolling forward with this as a plan. So presumably then, when he is healthy and recovered from this injury, he should, assuming everything goes as it's supposed to, eventually slot right back into being offensive tackle of the future. So that what do you do in the meantime? How much can you do, should you do in the meantime? We talked last week about how the Bears did re-sign Theo Benedict as an exclusive rights free agent, brought him back on a 1-year deal. So you've got him under contract at offensive tackle. You do have Karan Amagaji, your third-round pick from a couple years ago, still under contract. But Braxton Jones is a free agent. Jordan McFadden's a free agent. Ryan Bates is a free agent. So then do you have to go out and get another left tackle? And if so, like, how much do you spend or how much priority do you put on a left tackle who you only need for this season and might not even need for the whole season, depending on how soon Ozzy Trapillo could come back? Because there's a big difference between Ozzy Trapillo comes back in week 4 and Ozzy Trapillo comes back in week 12. You know, I think for the first, if the Bears can go through this offseason with a fairly confident prognosis and analysis to say Trapillo's hurt, but he'll be ready after the first month of the season. He'll miss 4 to maybe even 6 games, but no more than that. Like he'll start the season on IR, come off IR, and be good to go. I think that's a situation where I could talk myself into saying, okay, knowing that he's going to be there for most of the season and just miss the beginning, then maybe that's a spot where I can get away with starting Theo Benedict for those 4 to 6 games, or having competition between Benedict and Amagaji with the thought that Theo started last season, at least was okay, got the job done, wasn't a massive liability there. Could Theo Benedict tide you over for 4 to 6 weeks until Ozzy Trapillo returns and then gives you more of what you actually wanted at left tackle? I could, it's not ideal, but you could talk yourself into it and be okay with it. But then if Ozzy Trapillo is going to say miss 12 weeks, we're just picking a round number here, right? I guess now that it's a 17-game season, that's not exactly 2/3, but you get the idea. Then do you sign a veteran free agent to a 1-year deal? Do you use another draft pick and just say, hey, you can never have too many good young offensive tackles, and if the next rookie is better than Trapillo, then you can move him inside a guard, or, oh no, you have too many good offensive linemen, Trapillo can be a good swing tackle for you, or it gives you some flexibility in case somebody gets hurt, or if there's contract negotiation snafus with Darnell Wright. You know, like you can never have too many good offensive linemen. I wouldn't be that upset about them drafting one, but if Trapillo is supposed to be the long-term plan, then you'd prefer to use the draft pick somewhere else. So then you kind of have to, if you're looking at free agency, you kind of have to find this sweet spot of offensive tackle who is good enough to start for you, but also not so good that they would decline a 1-year deal, right? Like if you're looking at like the starting caliber left tackles in free agency, those guys are going to want to sign multi-year expensive deals. Like if you're trying to sign a guy to a 1-year fill-in type of thing, it's usually going to be the really old guys that are late in their careers. I think back to when the Bears had Jason Peters starting at left tackle in, was that 2019, 2020, in the Matt Nagy era? Like something like that. And how much better is that than what you saw from Theo Benedict? And Benedict's a young player who is developing, and maybe that experience could help him improve. Like, would you rather just tough out the whole season with Theo Benedict, knowing that it'll help him grow and become a better player, and maybe he looks like a starting caliber left tackle as the season goes on, and you feel really good about it? Like, it's just this tough spot of like, how much better can you get in free agency, and how much are you willing to spend? Like, is it worth $10 million, like a 1-year, $10 million kind of thing to bring in the best older veteran you can to lock down that spot versus go out and get a guy who will compete with Theo Bennett. Like, I'm going to use the name Larry Borum, not because I think they should sign Larry Borum, but like that caliber of player, right? Someone who has started some games you don't love as your starter, but if he has to start in a pinch, he could do it. Like, does that make you feel better about left tackle? If it's Dylan Radunz from the Saints, I know he plays right tackle, I guess, but or Stone Forsythe from the Raiders was not particularly great for them this past season, but he started some games and gets the job done. Or like Sean Ryan from the Packers is certainly not somebody they love there. I mean, it's just not you're not going to go find a solution at left tackle that you really love. So would you rather, I think they will try and bring in some kind of veteran there, or is the solution re-sign Braxton Jones? Braxton Jones was supposed to have a big fourth year in Chicago to then cash in free agency this year. Obviously, he started 4 games and then benched. So now he's not going to get paid much on the open market. So would he be better off coming back to Chicago, getting to start at least a half a season or whenever until Ozzie Trapillo gets back, and maybe keep Ozzie Trapillo on the bench if he starts and plays well, then enter free agency again next offseason and be able to cash in? I get the sense, given how the benching went and how he never really fully came off an injured reserve at the end there, never got to play despite coming off injured reserve, it just feels like they're ready to kind of part ways and go different directions there. But it sure feels like it would make sense to both sides and kind of an awkward everybody needs to kiss and make up kind of situation. But we'll see. That's another one of these confounding offseason decisions that I don't know how to predict what the Bears can do at left tackle. They could make it a huge priority and go get someone that they feel like gives them a lot more stability than Theo Bennett, or they could just roll with Bennett and Namagaji, or they could use a draft pick. It's a wide open field at that spot as well. On both sides of the trenches, both absolutely pivotal, critical positions and decisions that we just have no full picture of what the Bears are going to do there. I think there's also some real question marks at linebacker that are partially injury related because of TJ Edwards' injury last season, but then also the Tremaine Edmunds questions as well. So we'll take a look at the complicated decision-making with that position and some free agents to be there as well. Next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The winter games are officially here, and if you're anything like us, you're locking in for events you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. And that's why following the winter games on FanDuel just makes sense. From medal counts to individual events to finding your angle on the sports you care about most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action. The drama of curling matches that start slow and somehow get intense fast. Speed skating races decided by inches. Hockey games that feel different right from the opening faceoff. Even niche events become must-watch when you're fully locked into the competition. I've been enjoying the biathlon this year where they ski downhill, they ski 5 kilometers, then while they're just finished skiing, they lay down and shoot targets with a gun while their heart rate's going 1,000 miles an hour, and then get back on their skis and ski the rest of the race. It's crazy. And FanDuel keeps the entire Olympic experience engaging from start to finish. The winter games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. The injuries at at linebacker for TJ Edwards, a little less severe than the type of injury we talked about for Ozzie Trapillo or even Dayo Odengbo and Shamar Turner on the defensive line. But I do think it's part of the factor here at linebacker, in addition to the questions about Tremaine Edmunds and whether or not it's worth the Bears to bring it back. So TJ Edwards suffered a fractured fibula, near the mid-season point in there. That's the kind of thing that might even take 6 months to recover, depending on, the exact severity of the fracture and the healing of the body, et cetera. Not a doctor, don't know the prognosis kind of stuff. But that would have him back by, what is that, April or May? He should be able to participate in most of the main off-season stuff. Certainly no question he'll be ready by training camp. Probably can and should be ready by OTA's mandatory minicamp that time of year. So it's not going to derail or threaten his regular season per se, but it does just create another question mark of exactly when is he going to be back, and is there any question about in what condition he will return? Will he be just 100% back to normal as he approaches turning 30 in August, or will there be any signs of lingering effects of that? Because all of a sudden, when you talk about the potential for Tremaine Edmunds as a salary cap casualty, and we'll take some time to go more in depth on the salary cap casualties as a broader concept in the coming days here on the Locked On Bears podcast. But it's a very common discussion this offseason. Should the Bears release Tremaine Edmunds because he's set to count about $17.5 million against your salary cap, and you could save $15 million if you release him. But then if you release Tremaine Edmunds and you have an injured TJ Edwards coming off of injury, like, does that create any extra question marks or instability at the position? Like, do they look at it and say, well, because Edwards is coming off of injury and starting to, again, 30's not old, but it's not young anymore in the NFL either. Like, is there more of an incentive to say, maybe we want to keep a little bit more continuity at that position? Or does Dennis Allen say, screw it, let's get Edmunds out of here, I want to get my kind of linebackers in here? I guess we should throw in as well that, Noah Sewell also tore his Achilles tendon in week 17 at the very end of December. So that's another one of these like 9 to 12 months kind of things. Like, he might not be ready for week 1. Certainly might not be ready for training camp. And so it's not like, you could plug him in as someone who we've seen play well in this scheme. And DeMarco Jackson is set to be a free agent this offseason. So, if you re-sign him, maybe he could plug in if you need him to. But do they make that a priority, or do they want to say, hey, let's go out and get another true, like, experienced starting veteran linebacker? I mean, they have Ruben Hippolyte and Eamon Ogbagmamiga coming back as well, but probably not guys they're going to look at as starters at this point. So it's another position where injuries complicate this picture, in addition to the salary of Tremaine Edmunds and the free agency of DeMarco Jackson. I mean, I personally have quite a bit of confidence in DeMarco Jackson and wouldn't be totally upset if the Bears went into this season with DeMarco Jackson and TJ Edwards as your two top linebackers. I have a feeling Dennis Allen is going to want to go out and do a little bit more at that position. That doesn't mean sign the top, most expensive linebackers out there like Devin Lloyd from the Jaguars or whoever. But there's some guys with some Saints experience there, including like Demario Davis, for example, who was a longtime veteran in Dennis Allen's defense, that maybe he looks out there and says, I can find guys that fit a little bit more of what he wants, as opposed to he inherited Edmunds and Edwards. And, they gave TJ Edwards the contract extension. So there's clearly, I think, an affinity there, but he kind of didn't have a choice when it came to Tremaine Edmunds. Now he does. So we'll see if he chooses that. DeMarco Jackson was kind of a late addition to the process, but someone he clearly liked from New Orleans. But does he like him enough to hand him the keys to the car in the middle of the defense after a half a season of him playing pretty well? But it's a big responsibility, key spot wearing the green dot in Dennis Allen's defense. Or do they prefer DeMarco Jackson as a backup who they could trust to start in case of injury, but they got to go out and get a starter anyway? I mean, the nice thing is, if you clear up $15 million from Tremaine Edmunds, you could replace Tremaine Edmunds with a starter for half of that price and still have a bunch of extra salary cap space from that to go sign safeties, to go sign pass rushers, to maybe sign a left tackle. We'll see how the Bears choose to play that out. But man, between these injuries and these salary cap questions, it's just really tricky to sit here today and be super confident in how the Bears are going to approach those positions. Like, it's one thing to look at the safety position, and we have a pretty good sense that, yeah, they may let Jaquan Brisker walk. They will try and bring back Kevin Byard. Like, we can make some pretty educated guesses based on how they've commented about those positions and maybe some others on the roster. And Ryan Poles says defensive line's a priority. It's always a priority, but it doesn't tell us how and when and where they might address it and how much confidence they have in Dio Odengbo and Shamar Turner and where they might try and prioritize investments. So it's going to be let's call it a mysterious offseason for now. And I hope that, I think that the Combine will be the next time we hear from Ryan Poles and Ben Johnson. So I hope that at that time, they can at least give us some clarity in saying, okay, we don't expect Trapillo to be back, so left tackle is going to be a priority for us. Or we do expect Odengbo back, and we think he's going to do great things, and kind of signal that, hey, maybe they're not going to go out and get the big name pass rusher. They're not going to tell us all their plans and everything, but if they could let us in a little bit more on how they're thinking about their own guys, which is usually fair game to ask about and get answers for. I'm hoping that can help us be more informed heading into free agency and the NFL draft as to how the Bears might approach these things. I hope that listening to the Locked On Bears podcast helps make you a little bit more informed heading into free agency and the NFL draft. And the best way to stay informed is to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making the Locked On Bears podcast your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Don't forget to check out that Locked On Everydayers Club If you want that ad-free audio experience, it's lockedonbears.supercast.com. Otherwise, keep tuning in the same way you always tune in. We're free and available on all platforms. We're not going to go behind a paywall. This is just an added way to enhance your listening if you'd really like to. But as long as you keep tuning in to Locked On Bears, you're always going to leave with another opportunity to bear down.